Thanks for joining us. Doug Walker is off on this Sunday morning. Welcome to WLOX News this week. Well, the U.S. and its allies continue its air campaign against the terrorist group ISIS. Just how big a threat does this militant group pose to the U.S.? Here with the very latest from our nation's capital, we welcome U.S. Senator Roger Wicker. Senator Wicker, thanks for being with us. We actually have you for the entire show, so we have a lot of issues. We're just going to be kind of bouncing back and forth.
Great,
so
good.
Just preparing you for that.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, let's start with the air campaign in Iraq and Syria against ISIS. And I'm just curious, in your opinion, from a constitutional point of view, with the War Powers Act, and congressional authority. Do you believe congressional authority is necessary for current and future action, or do you think the president has the power to go it alone?
I think from a purely legal standpoint, the president has the power to do what he's ordered as our commander-in-chief and under previous congressional authorizations. But I think as a practical matter, to make sure the country is behind this effort, it would have been better had the president asked for authorization. It was sort of an equivocal way to put it. He said, we'd welcome a resolution if you could get one together. But that's different from asking the Congress to be part of this national effort, to speak on behalf of the people that elected us and to say we're all in this together.
Well, if that's the case, why doesn't Senator Harry Reid have the Senate in session right now debating this crisis instead of everybody back home, 43 senators anyway, I believe, campaigning for midterm elections?
This is the longest recess pre-election that we've had in quite a while. I do believe Congress should be in session debating this issue and making sure we send the signal that the United States is together on this. The elected representatives in the Congress, together with the commander-in-chief, speaking as one voice. That would be better. For me to answer why Senator Reid didn't keep us in session
I'm personally happy to hear you say that, because you mean what makes him tick is beyond
That's right, yes.
Well, I'm happy to hear you say that, because I personally agree, and I think most Americans would like to see everybody on the same. Do other senators feel that way? Are other senators wondering why are we in session?
True, and I think that's actually bipartisan. I hear Senator Kane from Virginia, a Democrat, saying this. Senator Brasso was on some of the Sunday shows last week saying much the same thing. But then, you know, clearly there's one person in the country that can schedule votes in the United States Senate, and that's Harry Reid, and he's the majority leader, and he's decided otherwise. So it's great to be on the coast. Talking to you, Dave.
Well, that was quite a shift of gears. You kind of threw me off a little bit on that one.
I'm glad to be here. I'd rather the Congress have spoken.
But if not in Washington, you're glad to be on the
We're not in session. I'm back here
now,
talking to people like you.
Congress and the administration did kind of agree on a $500 million package to arm and train the Syrian Freedom Army, whoever they are, whatever that is. That worries me a little bit, because are they even our friends? Do we know who they are? They say they're going to vet them. How do you vet a rebel group? You know, you think that might be a bad idea?
Okay, we have ways of being careful, and yes, they should be vetted. I mean, to say that we're not going to vet them would be even worse. So I mean,
you call in their leaders and ask them questions and ask to see the resume?
Actually, we have professional tactics of figuring out who's likely to be on our side. And let me take a step back. You know, the Bush surge in Iraq toward the end of his last term was controversial. I supported it. I spoke in favor of it on the House floor. The surge worked, and basically Iraq was stable. The mistake we made was not giving the people that we knew were reliable in the Iraqi army the stability with a follow-on United States presence. And our new president, President Obama, was so eager to say he had withdrawn everyone from Iraq.
Well, he ran on that.
He ran on that, and I think that was a wrong-headed policy. But frankly, after you become commander-in-chief and the generals are giving you one set of advice about what is most likely to succeed, I think you have the prerogative to analyze what the experts are telling you. So I wish the president had done that, much as we did, Dave, in Korea. When we left a residual force there, and this has been there now for half a century, we're not fighting in Korea, but my son was just recently stationed in Korea. We are there as a stabilizing force, and because of that, our gains a half a century ago are permanent, and Korea is a thriving, multi-religious,
Well, one thing that did happen this past week, which might be a lesson learned from the scenario you just described, is combat troops were supposed to have been completely withdrawn from Afghanistan at the end of this year. We've been there for almost 13 years fighting in Afghanistan. The administration signed a deal with the new Afghan leaders to leave 10,000 combat troops there for an indefinite period of time. A lot of war-weary Americans don't like that, but do you think that's a good idea to keep troops in Afghanistan?
Yes, I do. And I issued a statement to that effect. I have not made any secret of my hope that the president will this time listen to the generals and make sure that having gone to all the trouble, all the blood, sweat, and toil and treasure that we've spent in Afghanistan, that we don't throw it away as we did in Iraq. I think the follow-on force there in Afghanistan will be involved in very little combat at all, much as our residual force in Korea or our forces in Germany have not been involved in combat. But the United States can provide a stabilizing force, and it would be a mistake not to listen to the generals and leave that force there. And frankly, the Afghan people are almost unanimous in saying, we've been through this thing with the Taliban. We've been through this thing with Al-Qaeda. We don't want that again, so let's make sure that the United States and our allies send the signal that we're not going to abandon the field as we did elsewhere.
I wish I was as confident as some people are, because I'm afraid it's just going to be a repeat. As soon as we leave, the Taliban's back out of the shadows, and Afghanistan is. So what are we going to do? Stay there forever?
Well, we've stayed in Germany for
That's different, Germany.
65
you don't have the
years.
Shiites, Sunni.
We've stayed in Korea for half a century. They're happy for us to be there. We provide a stabilizing force in Korea. It's totally different from North Korea because we're there, and frankly, a stabilizing force in the Pacific Rim because of that.
Before we go to break, I have one more question, and then we'll shift gears from what's happening with ISIS. This has been an air campaign to this point. The president has been very clear, and again, this I think goes back to his promise to his base, as if there's no way combat troops are going to be introduced to that theater there. Others are saying there is no way you might be able to degrade ISIS, but you'll never destroy them without so-called boots on the ground. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, let's give credit where credit is due to our air campaign. We've got the best Air Force and Navy aerial force in the world, and they're getting the job done with the help of air forces from other Arab, other Muslim countries. So credit where credit is due there to the air campaign. Boots on the ground are going to be necessary from someone. I think Saudi Arabia is ready to help there, but frankly, what General Dempsey said to me made sense, and that is he's going to analyze the situation as events unfold, and he's going to give the president the best advice he can based on the circumstances.
Would you support those boots on the ground being U.S. Marines?
Here's what I don't want to do, and here's why I wish the president hadn't spoken quite so flatly. I don't think you tell the enemy what you will and what you won't do. Now, that's part of strategy. And so to take things off the table I think is a mistake, and I think it was a mistake for the president to be quite as transparent as he was about what our strategy and tactics would be.
All righty. Well, we're going to take our first time out on the entire program today. We have United States Senator Roger Wicker from the great state of Mississippi. Welcome back to WLOX News This Week. Our guest for the entire program, U.S. Senator Roger Wicker, back home in Mississippi as the U.S. Senate is in recess right now. Let's go to another part of the world, and that would be China, specifically Hong Kong. This week, you reached across the aisle with Democrat Patrick Leahy of Vermont and issued a statement that you said you're distressed with the use of tear gas, pepper spray, other such methods against peaceful demonstrators in Hong Kong by the Chinese government. They're trying to have some kind of democracy and some free elections there. So you're very disturbed by what's going on.
Well, I'm disturbed because the Chinese government is reaching across the strait there into Hong Kong. It's supposed to be a one country, two systems type of government there. But the people in Hong Kong are used to free elections. They had it under the British for decades and decades, and then the British ceded the country back to China according to a very old treaty. But what the Chinese government wants to do is say, yes, you get to have free elections. It's just that we, the Beijing Chinese government, we get to pick the candidates.
Yeah.
After we pick them, you can vote among them. Yeah. So at any rate, as I expected, the people in Hong Kong have risen up against this. Why is it important to us, Dave? We sell, in Mississippi, we sell $1 billion worth of stuff to China every year. If the economy in Hong Kong gets the flu, it affects us here in the United States of America. So we should be concerned about this. What the democracy advocates in Hong Kong are doing right now is basically calling for a national holiday. They're just not going to work. The economy of Hong Kong needs to do well if we're going to keep exporting things from Mississippi.
Do we need to do more to support the democracy forces?
What you do is diplomacy. I mean, clearly we're not going to rattle any sabers.
No. We need to speak out.
That's right. We need to speak out, and that's why Senator Leahy, the President Pro Tem of the Senate, liberal Democrat from Vermont, and Roger Wicker, conservative Republican from Mississippi, are trying to speak as one voice.
We need to see a little more of that. Why don't we see more of that?
You know, you'd be surprised.
Remember Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill?
Right.
Remember
Absolutely.
Trent Lott and Bill Clinton? Why aren't we seeing? You know, I think most Americans are just so upset over the, if I can say, toxic environment.
You know, actually, I've always been someone to reach across the aisle when it doesn't violate my principles. You know, as I go around the state, half the people say, don't give an inch, stand firm, don't let up, don't compromise. And the other half say, why can't you folks work together and get along? So, you know, we try to do the best we can, issue by issue, and certainly on something like freedom and democracy in an area of the world where it really affects our economy. We ought to be able to talk as Americans rather than conservatives or liberals.
Now, I know you're a U.S. Senator now with the Centers for Disease Control, but I have to ask you one of the big stories this week in America. Americans everywhere are very shaken by this with the Ebola in West Africa. Ebola being terrible, now suddenly it's appeared on our shores in Dallas, Texas, and we understand this man who's been affected has come in contact with 8, 10, 12, 14 people. Are you confident in America's know-how, America's protocol, America's ability to take care of I hate to use the word pandemic because that might be a little dramatic, but what can you tell folks who are worried?
Dave, I think we have the best disease control system in the world. I'm confident. I'm not overconfident. Things can happen. But this is why I was on an African trip last year with Dr. Frieden, the guy that's been on all the news programs recently, because we fight disease in other continents so it never gets to the United States of America, or so when it does, it gets in very manageable levels. So we have a pretty good program, the best in the history of the world, And I think we're going to be able to prevent a pandemic coming to the United States.
All righty. Before we go to break, immigration reform. The president, some say promised, others said threatened to, through executive action, pass immigration reform. Some might say amnesty. And then he put it off suddenly till after the midterm elections because he was afraid it might negatively impact some of the Democratic senators running for re-election.
He didn't say that was the reason,
Well,
but I think you're correct. That's undoubtedly the reason. Two things. We need to secure the border, prove that we can do that before we start talking about a comprehensive solution that depends on a secure border. So secure the border has been number one. And secondly, it's just wrong for the president to say, if the Congress doesn't act, I will. You know, if the Congress doesn't act, then he needs to work with the Congress more and see if we can get some compromise together.
His supporters say that Congress isn't working with him.
Well, if that's the case, then we have an impasse. But the Constitution says laws are passed by the House and Senate. They go to the president for a veto or a signature. And that's the way laws are supposed to be changed under our Constitution. So it sounds great. It's a wonderful jingo for the president to say, if Congress doesn't act, well, I'll just have to do it myself. It's just not the way the Founding Fathers envisioned our country.
And I think more and more Americans are seeing that. And we're going to take another quick break, and we'll be right back with more. In the studio this weekend on the Sunday morning with us, U.S. Senator Roger Wicker here on the Mississippi coast, back home in the Magnolia State from Washington. Senator, a few election kind of questions, if you don't mind. Midterm elections is huge coming up in November. The Senate needs 6 seats, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, to flip in order to take majority in the United States Senate. A lot of pundits are saying there's a good chance that'll happen. Personally, I think the Democrats will hold on by a thread, by the way.
Oh, my goodness.
But,
pundit, David.
But from your perspective, what difference would it make if the Republicans did?
Oh, okay, it would make a lot of difference. And I do think maybe the chances are 60% now. They may rise and fall.
Kind of keeps coming down.
But it makes a difference. I think 8 years of Harry Reid as majority leader, that's been way too long. He does stop the flow of legislation. There's some 300 bills. The House of Representatives has passed, and we're not able to even take those bills up on the Senate floor. So I think the American people are going to decide that it's time for a change in the Senate leadership, and that's the way.
So you think the biggest difference would be the removal of Harry Reid?
Well, if you get Harry Reid replaced by a Mitch McConnell as Republican leader, for example, you see better treatment.
That's our choice.
You see better. You know, it's our choice. But what you do is you see more bills brought up under regular order. Senators, Republicans, Democrats get to offer amendments. Also, there's going to be a different flow of Barack Obama appointments going through the Senate. I think you won't have the blitzkrieg that we've had with all of them getting passed by a majority vote. I think there'll be a little more attention given to all of these rules and regulations that the Obama administration has been running out there in short order.
Another election question a little closer to home, and I really don't want to drag you into what happened during the Cochran-McDaniel fiasco. You know, this legal circus that has been going on and on and on with the fight after the runoff. Do you fear, though, as a supporter of Thad Cochran, that as a result of all of this, the November 4th election could be impacted? Travis Childers, the Democrat, may sneak in through the back door?
Well, look, I'm a big supporter of Senator Cochran. He's a friend of mine. I've known him for a long time, but I'm supporting Thad Cochran because of what he can do for the state, what he can do for the shipyard, for our military installations on the coast, and what he could do as chairman of the Appropriations Committee. That's why I'm supporting Thad Cochran. I think his supporters have got to take care of business. I think the voters can do anything they want to on Election Day, and I think most people in this state would prefer to keep Senator Cochran on the job, and they're going to have to turn out to vote, and and make sure their voices are heard.
So you think turnout's going to be the key?
I think turnout's the key, and I don't think anybody's ever got any election in the bag, which is why Senator Cochran is moving around the state and going to small towns and communities and shaking hands and trying to turn out the vote.
Let's end the show by going back to the Biggert-Waters Act. We talked about it for a long time because everyone here on the coast was so afraid about their flood insurance premiums going through the roof as a result of Biggert-Waters. Would you use the word stop or delay regarding what Congress did to those increases?
Right.
Well, what is it? Did you stop it or did you delay it?
Well, it prevented for a time these huge increases going into effect. It is not a permanent solution, and I've always made it clear. It is a temporary solution. We need to go back. We're told on the one hand, make the program actuarially sound. On the other hand, we know it's got to be affordable or people will simply not be able to insure and they'll lose their property. So we got to hit a happy medium there that works, and we didn't have anything that worked for the people. And so that's why we took a timeout, say keep it where it is, and go back and see if we can run the numbers, have a program that is closer to something that's actuarially sound, but doesn't mean that people have to lose their homes and their business.
But you do agree that something must be done because in the event of some kind of calamity, the National Flood Insurance Program would just hemorrhage money.
Something must be done to make the program work better in the long term, yes, sir.
Is there interest in Washington?
Oh, absolutely. And
or is it just getting lost in the shuffle amid all of these other dramatic stories?
Because it's a temporary stopgap fix, the Congress will be forced in the next term to take it up again, and hopefully we get a better solution than we got last time with Biggert-Waters. Biggert-Waters didn't work. If you can believe it, Dave, Congress made a mistake in passing that little bit of legislation.
I refuse to believe that. That would be a first.
We need to get it right.
That would be a first.
We need to get it right because so many homeowners and small business people depend on it.
Senator Roger Wicker, nice to have you. If you're not going to be in session in Washington, it's good to have you on the Mississippi coast. Thanks for joining us this weekend.